What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the CotAcasT. My name is Brian Bermudez, and I'm the host of the Crafted Air podcast. The podcast not only for aviation enthusiasts, but also those with a general interest in the world of aviation. Join us on our journey as we explore the horizon of aviation together. I'm so glad that you guys are tuned in for another CotAcasT. CotAcasT. You gotta kind of say it a little slow, because when you're referring the CotAcasT to your friends, you gotta make sure they hear it. Today's episode, so we changed the format of in this CotAcasT, and it's gonna be a really exciting. I'm really excited for this episode, and we changed the usual format. If you've been tuning into the previous episodes, we've been taking a look at some aviation topics from around the country and around the world. And now we switch gears, and after speaking to many of my students in many of the classes that I'm teaching this semester, and I'm a professor of aviation maintenance, and I wanted to make this podcast with everybody in mind, and particularly the students, aviation students, and these aviation maintenance students. And so I definitely take your suggestions seriously, guys. For all the students at Vaughn College listening right now to this CotAcasT, I really do appreciate it. And we got a lot of talented and very passionate potential A&Ps coming out of Vaughn College. I'm liking what I see, especially this semester. Oh man, some really good students this semester. A lot of good questions and a lot of classes. But this leads me to 4 questions that I look to give you guys some insight on today. And the 4 questions, all pertaining to the A&P license. Yes. The first question I ask is, what is an A&P license? And we go through the basics from those listening to those unsure. I can't tell you how many times that I have students that are like midway towards the program, the degree program, and they're asking very basic questions about the A&P exams and the processes and what it entails. And so we go through all of that. I feel like a lot of students don't want to ask the question because they don't want to be embarrassed. They feel as though, or every other student in the lab or the lecture room knows these basics. This is basic information that we're supposed to know. And in fact, the process may be a little bit complex to those people just coming into aviation. So we look at the A&P license. What is an A&P license? The second thing we explore, where to get the A&P license. Where do we go? How do we do it? I mean, for many of our listeners, maybe they're already enrolled somewhere. Maybe there's people currently enrolled and they're thinking about switching out. Maybe there's people in a different field of aviation and thinking about becoming a mechanic. Or maybe you want to give information to somebody that's thinking about it and they want to come into this program. Doesn't matter if you're on the West Coast, the Midwest, the East Coast. This is a great industry to get into. And so we're going to explore where to get the A&P license. The third topic or question that we look at is how to study for the A&P. Come on. If you're listening right now, that was the hot key. Yeah, that's what you were listening for. How we study, what's the best way to study for the A&P license. And for those of you listening, this process of being certified and taking examinations to become a person that fixes aircraft or anything aerospace in the United States, it's an interesting process. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily think. A lot of people, I think, would just automatically assume that this is just a person that applies for a job as a mechanic, and maybe the airline offers them some training on how to fix it. I can't tell you how many times somebody asks me what I do for a living, and like they're just like in awe, just because they've never even thought of like, wow, there's people that actually fix airplanes. The concept is mind blowing to some people. And the fourth question or topic that we look at is how to prepare yourself for a job. So once you've already passed everything, when we know what the license is, we know where to get it, we know how we're going to study for it, but how we're going to prepare ourselves to get jobs out there or set ourselves up for successful career endeavors. We'll take a look at that. First things first, today's episode is brought to you by Craft of the Air. Stop memorizing outdated content. Just stop it. And rereading textbooks without really understanding your aviation content. If you're looking to obtain an airframe and power plant license to fix airplanes, Craft of the Air offers personalized learning sessions remotely from the convenience of your house. Are you in the field of aviation and need help accomplishing your next big project? Are you tired of searching endlessly for unreliable data? Everybody listening, stop opening up this tab, you're opening up that tab, you're checking this, you're texting this person, what is the answer? Stop it. Craft of the Air is the second you when you need it. Anything aviation. Visit www.craftoftheair.com today. Again, that's www.craftoftheair.com today and speak with a federally licensed professional. Craft of the Air, our craft is of the air. You like that? The way I stress that out? Yeah, if you're listening for that advertising. The very first topic on the CotAcasT today, the question is, what is an A&P license? What is this? No, I'm not talking about AP calculus. I'm talking about an A&P license. And simply put, an aircraft mechanic certificate is basically two ratings. And so an A is an airframe, and the second portion is power plant, which is the P. So that's why we hear it referred to as A&P mechanic or an A&P license, because we have airframe and power plant. So that's actually two separate ratings, two separate federal FAA ratings. And obviously, a mechanic is somebody that's going to be fixing an aircraft, but not only an aircraft, and that's a big misconception. A&P is somebody that's fixing a multitude of things, and we'll take a look at that. Or you'll take a listen to it. Now, there's a process. Now, in order to get this A&P license, you need to pass a written, an oral, and a practical. So there's three portions. And that's for each rating. A and P, airframe and power plant. Now, another add-on to that is that for that license, you need a general license. And that general license is associated with the first rating that you attend. So let's say, for instance, you're going for your A license first. You're going to take your writtens for your A license, your orals, and your practicals. You'd also do the writtens, orals, and practicals for your general license. And then once you get that, if you want the P license, there's many mechanics out there that only have an A or only have a P. But if you want the P, then you would go after the written, oral, and practical for the power plant. So there's essentially 9 exams for this mechanic that as we refer to. There's 9 exams. So you got a written, oral, and practical for your general airframe and power plant. Now, in order to take those exams, we cannot just simply have somebody walk off the street. So you either need 18 months of practical experience or 30 months of practical experience performing duties on airframes, power plants, so on and so forth. There's ways on practical experience. More commonly, though, you could do it by graduating from an an FAA approved aviation maintenance technical school. Could be a technical school, could be incorporated into a college. I'll give you. We'll take a look at some of the bigger colleges and technical schools to get the A&P license. Now, you could do it that way. And a lot of those schools, they exist in many places. They're widely available throughout the country. And it's something where, if you really want it bad, you're going to figure out a way to get in. You put your head down and work hard and study hard, Now that's the exam. So we must pass, the written portions, the oral portions, and the practical portions. Now, you're tested by somebody referred to as a DME, and a DME is a designated mechanic examiner. Somebody designated by the FAA who's been certified to test you on knowledge, skills, and practicals. So that is the A&P license, and this gives somebody the ability to work on U.S. certificated aircraft. And that can include UAVs, commercial aviation, general aviation, helicopters, certain aerospace systems. And A&Ps are invaluable right now, really. A lot of energy companies, mechanical companies, a lot of rail companies that I see personally will pay an A&P a good salary because they hold that A&P because they've demonstrated their ability to go through all of these sections of knowledge, skills, and practicals. And this person is federally licensed at this point. And when you look at the different sections, in general, there's 12 sections. In airframe, there's 17, and in power plant, there's 16 sections. So it's not a one and done exam. I mean, it very well could be. The second question that we look into today on the CotAcasT is where to get an A&P license. So as I mentioned, you can get it out of Part 147 maintenance school. And what that basically means is it's FAA approved, and it has A&P course curriculum there. It could be in the form, as I said, it could be in a technical school, it could be in a college. But again, you want to make sure that the school, if you're not enrolled in a school and you're looking at doing this, make sure that the school is 14 CFR Part 147 approved. Now, it'll usually take to attend, you just need a high school diploma. I'm sure also a GED. But to attend any FAA certified aviation maintenance technical school, it usually takes about 18 to 24 months. You could probably knock it out. And usually you could at some of the colleges and technical schools and community colleges, you can put an associate's degree along with that. Now, when you graduate, that should prepare you to take the airman knowledge exams, the orals, writtens, and practicals. There's also another way. Now, you could do OJT, and OJT is on-the-job training. So let's say you don't necessarily, and this is a much cheaper option, if I'm being frank. The OJT option, and it provides practical experience, practices, materials, tools, equipment that are generally used in airframes. Once you meet those OJT experience requirements, then there's A&P refresher courses, and then you would have to submit documentary evidence So, there's two options there in terms of, where to get the A&P license. And if you are, attending a Part 147 maintenance school, once you're done with the program, once you've fulfilled the maintenance curriculum, the curriculum requirements for general, airframe, power plant, you can usually schedule the knowledge exams there. Also on the FAA website, there's actually a hot links to the Airman Knowledge Test Centers, a list of all of the Airman Knowledge Test Centers and all of the mechanic examiners throughout the country. So let's say you live somewhere that's in somewhat of a remote location. You may visit the FAA website, and they have a lot of good information on that. Going on to the third question that we have here. How's the best way to study for an A&P license? There's so many times that I have a student that will ask me this. Let's be straight up. One of the best ways to study for the A&P license is to contact Craft of the Air. That's the best way to study for the A&P license. Look, ask the question this a lot. Yeah, you always want to make sure that we take as many notes as we possibly can in class, that we save our lab books, that we take a look, that we try to understand every question that we're looking at in the test guides. But sometimes that's just not always possible. That's not practical in many instances. So, as I mentioned, there's writtens, orals, and practicals. And, obviously we'll have a DME. Now in the first section, you got to go through a written portion. And there'll be 60 questions for general, 100 questions for airframe, and 100 questions for power plant. That's out of thousands of questions. And those are randomly selected. The minimum passing score on that is 70. And so now once you've passed the written, you can go ahead and take the orals and practicals. The best way to study for the writtens, I always recommend buying the test guides. And there's test guides. ASA makes them, ASA test guides. They usually refer to as prepware. And they have the questions and they have the multiple choice. And I usually recommend to students to, try to highlight the correct answer in those multiple choices. It'll usually draw your attention to the question and to the correct answer. ASA has those test guides. Jeppesen, the Boeing company, also makes their own A&P test guides for the orals, writtens, and practicals. It does give examples of some of the questions that they can ask you guys. And it also gives you guys a list of the practicals that they could potentially have you do on the aircraft. The Jeppesen, I strongly recommend it. I always strongly recommend Jeppesen. I like the way they explain things. They do explain things a little bit differently than ASA, I gotta say. But I always love the Jeppesen textbooks. Baker School of Aeronautics has their own test guides. I hear a lot of students speaking about that. You can also test out there at Baker's field. And now I'm kind of hearing of the Dauntless Aviation. It's kind of like the software program, and it's similar to Prepware. ASA has test guides, but they also have an app. Has the questions on an app platform, a mobile platform, what have you. And Dauntless is a new company that I'm hearing a lot of students. I'm hearing positive feedback for this. So I'm in no way affiliated with Dauntless, and I actually reached out to Dauntless, and I've yet to hear back from them. But I was interested in getting further information about that. But I did hear some positive things about that. And there's a couple of A&P refresher courses to help students out before the orals and practicals. So that's always useful. All jokes aside, check out Craft of the Air. We do specialize. And somebody did ask, well, what's Craft of the Air? The CotAcasT is a podcast named after Craft of the Air. Craft of the Air offers personalized tutoring remotely. for the convenience of you guys, for the students. And we have personalized presentations for the students that I've had, the seniors that are listening. You guys know the way I teach. And you know that I like to create personalized content. I like to see you guys understanding these things. And so Crafted Air looks to offer that remotely and to help students out in preparation for these exams. But in addition to that, there's a couple of other things that Crafted Air offers. Yes. But cliffhanger, you gotta wait till the next one. And with that being said, we look at the fourth and final question, which is how to prepare yourself for jobs. Now, Crafted Air not only offers aviation maintenance training services, but they also offer aviation maintenance consulting. And Consulting by Crafted Air looks to facilitate anything aviation. And we look at things like this. I regularly have people ask me these general questions, getting out there into the field, and even people that already have their A&P licenses, considering these points. And when I'm asked the question by students or colleagues or prospective students, there's a couple of things that I like to key in on and think about, and things that I like to ask the client. And the first thing is, where are we going? But before we start to prepare yourself for a job, where in aviation are you going? Yes, you like to fly. Yes, you like to have flight benefits and fly for free. That's great. But not necessarily everybody in the field going in for that reason. For a lot of people, there's a genuine passion for aviation maintenance. There's a general interest in aviation maintenance or aviation business or other areas of aviation maintenance. So the first thing we think of, are you going into general aviation, commercial, aerospace, UAV systems, historic, MROs, engineering and support? There's now A&P positions that people work remotely with an A&P license. So these are all things to consider. Another thing that you gotta think about is are you gonna be exploring different certifications? You know, there's different things that you can do within the field. The specialty fields include avionics, balloons, airships, rotorcrafts. Rotorcrafts are helicopters. Unmanned aircraft systems. And if you think about in the future, maybe possibly getting a private pilot's license or exploring those things, these are things to consider. There's many companies that will sponsor somebody for additional certifications. There's many companies that will offer general familiarizations with certain aircrafts that are more useful than others. These are things to consider. Not everybody thinks this one. Continue to study. This is another point that I always tell my students. You know, once you get the A&P license, a lot of people aren't aware that the airlines are usually gonna keep testing you, and not only to test you to get you guys in and to make sure that you guys are properly qualified under their standards, but then you get tested once you're there, when you're sent away for certifications on certain systems and aircraft. So always continue to stay sharp with the studies. That's something that a lot of people may take for granted. You definitely want to stay alerted with aviation news pertaining to companies. The last thing you want to do is accept a contract from a company that's had bad news, bad publicity lately. If you see any financial issues, these are things to consider. Know the aviation field. Know what you're speaking about. The next thing to think about is considering the cost of living. This is one of the biggest things that clients will ask and speak about with me. And we have, you know, one of the first things that I think about is when you think about or consider the cost of living. Let's get really real here. Let's get really real where nobody's going to go. Do you want to work outside? Do you want to work during the day? Do you want to work at night? Do you want to work in the cold? Do you want to work in a warm climate? Do you want to work in a hangar? Do you want to work in maintenance control and have a desk? These are things to consider. Do you want to have a family? Are you starting a family? Are you a person that can't sleep certain times? These are things that certain people may not necessarily consider. These are things that I ask my clients. Another thing to think about is the cost of living. On the higher end, I think about LAX, Miami, SAN, HNL. And when I think about these hubs in these areas, I think about the airlines that are associated. In comparison, the lower cost of livings like ORD, OKC, and AGS, what are those hubs? These are things to consider. All right, another thing that I always will ask a student or a client is what are the personal interests? What are your personal interests or hobbies, and where do you see yourself? Business opportunities, additional licensing. People don't think about let's say you plan on owning an aircraft. Let's say that's your end goal. You're gonna be an aircraft mechanic. You want to fix your own plane, or you want to turn it into a business to become profitable. You want to start a business. Sure, why not? Well, state taxes are often overlooked, especially in general aviation. And that doesn't matter whether you're using your aircraft for business or for pleasure. There may be state taxes that apply to your aircraft in one way or another. And you got to ask yourself, if that's the case, what's your goal? Will you have an LLC on the aircraft? Will the LLC be based in any location other than your home base? You'd be adding the expense of maintaining the LLC in that state, or adding the expense of registering it and maintaining it in a foreign state. These are all things to consider. We're going off a little topic, but it's something to consider. Get to the COTA website and get a consulting session, and then we can talk about it. We'll give you more information. And always, one of the last things I always say is set a target goal and stay firm. You always stay firm and know your worth, guys. A&Ps are America's golden boys right now, golden boys and girls right now. We're needed. We're in demand. There's a shortage. Know your worth, guys. I think right now the average is 89,900, 89,008. Some of the highest employers I see on Indeed were Northern Grumman, and they're paying starting at 115,000. That being said, there's everybody's hiring. There's money to be made out there. Set a target, do research, or get in touch with COTA, and we'll do the research for you. We'll set the target, and we'll make sure that you get the job that you want. Yes, yeah. That's what COTA does. That's how we do it. Now this is the way we end this episode. This is how we wrap it up. I have a question for you guys, and I'll put the question in the poll on Spotify. You can find us on Spotify, the CotAcasT. And for the very first time, I asked the listeners a question. Are you sure? The students from Bourne College, you listening? You heard it? You heard it? That's the catchphrase. If you guys are listening from another state, who am I kidding? Who's listening from another state? But here's the question to the listeners. What? There's no editing on this. There's no editing on this CotAcasT. The question is, what is your biggest concern moving forward? What is your biggest concern moving forward? And we have options here. I always give you guys options. You guys know this. The first option is studying and passing the ratings. Are you worried about studying or just passing the ratings? Getting the orals, the practicals, the writtens, and all that? Option B is finding the right company or position. Is that something that's really bugging you out? Something that's really been on your mind? Or have people been asking you about that? Friends, family? Next biggest thing that I hear from students, they're undecided on the area of concentration within aviation. And then the fourth thing that I usually hear from students, or one of the concerns that I have students bring up to me, is they're unsure how they're going to translate what they learned to practical applications out there. They say, I don't know how I'm going to learn all this stuff in 2 years. And then at the end, I'm going to be fixing a $200 million aircraft with 300 people's lives. There's certain things that you'd be surprised. And this question is applicable to any listener. Go do it. Do it. Go take the poll. Think about it. Think back. As an A&P now, think back. And you could be an A&P now, still trying to look for the right company. Still something that concerns you. An A&P now that you're still unsure if you're in the right area of concentration. There's so many different fields, so many areas. But you could be a new A&P and you're still unsure how to translate that learned knowledge into practical applications. But you guys will have to go to the poll, and you guys will have to tune in for the next episode of the CotAcasT. And I'll call it as I see it. I call it as I see it. That about wraps it up for this week's episode of the CotAcasT. If you guys have not done so already, please, are you sure? Take this opportunity to check out the Craft of the Air website at www.craftoftheair.com. Again, that's www.craftoftheair.com, and get a free initial consultation today. Craft of the Air, our craft is of the air. Thanks for listening, guys. I really do appreciate it. Before we go, make sure at some point you guys show some love for the CotAcasT and share it with your friends by following and leaving us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. I do appreciate you guys listening. I hope you guys stay safe and have a great day, guys.